The United States has condemned reports of Russian bombing in the area. Demonstrators take to the streets of Johannesburg as the UN World Summit gets underway. And chlorine leaks at a Czech chemical plant damaged by floods could be life-threatening. Hello and welcome to BBC World News. I'm Roshni Karwal. The United Nations World Summit on Sustainable Development begins in Johannesburg shortly. Already the summit has attracted criticism for having too vague an agenda, and violent clashes between police and anti-globalization protesters are taking place. Direct to Johannesburg, where I'm joined by our correspondent Alex Kroger, who is at the scene of the latest demonstrations. Alex, what is going on?
Well, there are several hundred demonstrators gathered here. They've been chanting slogans. They've been rushing at the police. The police seem to have been overwhelmed. A short time ago, they fired stun grenades into the crowd, and they're using riot gear to keep the protesters back. It's a variety of groups, and it's quite a confrontational situation at the moment.
Alex, as you said, I can hear chanting in the background. What are these protesters saying?
They're chanting for land reform. They're chanting anti-globalization slogans. This is a coalition of several groups, mostly local South African activists who've come together using the summit in Johannesburg as an opportunity to get their message across. They're criticizing the amount of money, the amount of resources that are going into the summit, the number of people coming here, and they're using it as a platform to get their own views across.
Alex, can you describe who exactly these protesters are?
Well, they come from a range of groups, in particular one called the Landless People's Movement, which has about 70 protesters here, and they are calling for land reforms. Of course, that highlights the issue that's been going on in neighboring Zimbabwe, and the presence of Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe at the summit will also be an issue of concern as leaders seek to bring pressure on him for the situation there. And the activists are tying into all the issues that will be brought up at the summit.
Alex, a rocky start to a very high-profile summit. Will there be increased security measures from here on?
There will. There are about 10,000 police officers and security guards on duty for the summit, and the government is very keen to avoid any kind of disruption. They're trying to present Johannesburg as an African city that works. South Africa has been very troubled. Johannesburg is known for its high crime rate. It would be the government's worst nightmare if anything like one of these demonstrations were to disrupt the summit in the way that we've seen in previous high-profile events such as Seattle or Genoa.
Alex Kroger, our correspondent in Johannesburg. And if you want more details on the World Summit on Sustainable Development, you can log on to bbcnews.com, the new international edition of the BBC's award-winning website. India has been suffering from extremes of weather this year, with flooding in some areas and droughts in others. However, the crisis has reached surprising levels in Delhi itself, where main supplies have shut down altogether. A state of emergency has been declared in one of China's largest cities as floodwaters continue to surge down the river Yangtze. Officials in Wuhan, home to 7 million people, said the river was 15 centimeters above the danger level. The flood surge is heading for Wuhan after passing Dongting Lake in the Hunan province. There, water levels are now receding slowly. Thousands of soldiers and volunteers have been working around the clock to try to prevent the 3,000 square kilometer lake from overflowing. Straight to the shores of Dongting Lake in China, where our correspondent Andrew Webb joins us on the phone. Andrew, how bad is the situation?
Well, Roshni, the situation is getting a little bit better than it was a little while ago. We've had a point where a huge surge of water has come down the river and passed through Dongting Lake, and so now the water levels have gone down by, I would say, about a couple of meters in the last few hours. So people are extremely worried. There are lots of people building up the supports, but for now, the immediate threat in this area appears to be over.
Andrew, you mentioned the worry that people are going through. What is being done to prevent the worst happening?
Really, this is a situation of people trying their utmost to prevent the houses being destroyed and prevent a huge loss of life. So every person who can get involved is there building up the sides of the lake, and also we've got the army here, and it's just every single person who can is there trying to build up the sides and stop leaks. There have been leaks, there have been breaches, but so far it seems to be holding.
It's just one of the causes Arundhati Roy took up with a burning passion, a controversial construction project in central India. The building of the Sardar Sarovar Dam calls for change and development. Officials claim it will bring much-needed water and electricity to the Gujarat region. But the project will also bring widespread flooding and the displacement of many farmers.
We're talking about 400,000 people who are losing their homes because of this dam.
Last October, Roy took part in demonstrations against the Indian Supreme Court and its approval of the dam. It's her role in these protests that led to Roy's jail sentence and fine. Roy was sentenced at Delhi Supreme Court on Wednesday. Her lawyers gave this statement from her.
I stand by what I have said, and I am prepared to suffer the consequences. The dignity of the court will be upheld by the quality of their judgments. The quality of this judgment will be assessed by the people of this country. The message is clear. Any citizen who dares to criticize the court does so at his or her peril.
One shouldn't have expected much different from the judiciary of this kind, because the judges were biased, as we have been saying all through.
Arundhati Roy will serve her day-long sentence at Delhi's Tihar jail. Roshni Karwal, BBC News. You're watching BBC World. What's often described as the biggest street party in Europe gets underway in London later on Sunday. The Notting Hill Carnival has grown dramatically since it started in the early 1960s. Then just a few thousand people attended. Now, nearly 4 decades on, it's become a massive celebration of Caribbean arts and culture. But the increase in numbers is said to be compromising safety, and there are plans to move the carnival to a new venue. Good morning. It's a victory for South Korea's main opposition party. Provisional numbers show it's won the largest number of seats in the country's general election. The U.S. expects economic growth across the world to return to pre-Asian crisis levels. Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers forecasts global growth this year to reach 4.2%. That's the kind of growth the world enjoyed before the Asian crisis struck in mid-97. World news, more victims of a Ugandan doomsday cult have been discovered. 53 more bodies were dug up under the home of religious cult leader Dominic Katarina. Palestinians reject Israel's latest peace proposal. Israeli Premier Ehud Barak is offering the Palestinians the suburbs around contested Jerusalem at a seal with a compulsive urge to scratch. Homer, the elephant seal, found his way to a wharf in Gisborne, New Zealand, and gave some workers the shock of their lives. Elephant seals spend most of their day scratching, and for this young pup, parked cars and trucks were just what he was looking for. And that's a wrap of World News this Thursday morning. Back to you, C.
Okay, thanks for that, Roshni. We'll catch up with you tomorrow.
Authorities say the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam are responsible for both attacks. CNBC Asia's Roshni Karwal has been following the story, and she joins us from our newsroom now. Rosh?
Thank you, Martin. President Kumathunga suffered minor shrapnel wounds to her right eye after a suicide bomb attack. That attack came during her final campaign rally in Colombo on Saturday. Many analysts say that this attempt on her life could actually boost her chances of staying in power. The attempted assassination of Sri Lankan President Chandrika Kumaratunga could boost her standing in tomorrow's election by drawing sympathy votes from the Sinhalese majority. That's despite her failure to bring an end to the island's 16-year-long civil war. The LTT is fighting for a separate state for the minority Tamils in the north and east of the island. The conflict has claimed over 60,000 lives, but it was on a platform of peace that Kumaratunga won the presidency the first time round in 1994. However, Kumaratunga actually stepped up the war efforts after the Tamil Tiger rebels broke off peace talks in 1995. And the unpopularity of the civil war makes it a tight race between Kumaratunga and Ranil Wickremesinghe, the leader of the opposition UNP. In a nationwide address from her hospital bed, Kumaratunga called her survival a miracle. She urged that there be no reprisals from the blast and called for peace in the election.
We are going into an election on a wave or a crest of violence, unprecedented violence really. If you look at the bombs and so on that went off as well, we have more murders than we have had before in other elections, which were in a much more violent ground context.
Meanwhile, in northern Sri Lanka, there are reports of renewed fighting between Tamil rebels and Sri Lankan troops at the causeway that links mainland Sri Lanka and the Jaffna Peninsula. So far, police in Colombo have arrested 15 people suspected of aiding in the assassination attempt, and the government is trying to find out how the suicide bomber got so close to the president and why security was so lax. For the latest out of Colombo, we're talking to Sri Navaratnam from Dow Jones Newswires. He joins us on the line from the Sri Lankan capital, Colombo. Mr. Navaratnam, what's the latest on the ground in Colombo?
What we're hearing from doctors is that she has not suffered anything serious to her eye, although there are some shrapnel wounds, shrapnel that's taken out of her right eye.
What are the chances of a free and fair election taking place now, and will international monitors be able to assess how the elections are being conducted?
The chances of a free and fair elections are not all that bad.
Most people collect books for the sheer joy of it, but if you're looking at this as an investment, well, you'll need some patience. Experts say that you should plan on keeping your collection for at least 10 years. And even then, don't expect to retire on the capital gains from your book collection. That Singapore Airlines is investing over $2 million into SQE travel. And with that hefty investment, an assurance from the airline that the fares on SQE travel will be as competitive as those offered by tour companies. Whether you play it or sell it, make sure you fine-tune your investment strategy so it strikes just the right note. For Smart Money, I'm Roshni Karwal. In Asia, the online art scene really is more about virtual galleries rather than the business of e-commerce. That's the situation for now, because experts say that the e-commerce route really is a strategy that artists and art dealers can't afford to brush aside. Good evening and welcome. Thanks for joining us on Business Day. In tonight's headlines, stocks here again rose sharply, boosted by fresh fund buying on the back of a stronger yen. The Straits Times Index soared 25.7 points, or 2.7%, to a 9-week high of 977 points. In the region, Tokyo stocks fell for a second day. The Nikkei Index slid 146 points, or 1%, to a 13-year low of 12,900 points. On currency trading, the dollar fell against the yen, extending this week's 12% loss as investors bought yen to pay back loans. Next Monday's East Asia Economic Summit will tackle, among other issues, capital controls and financial liberalization. This has been Business Day. I'm Roshni Karwal. Thank you for joining me, and good night. Good evening and welcome to the third episode of Singapore at Work, where we zoom in on small and medium-sized companies that work with computers. Hello again, you're watching Singapore at Work. This week we visit companies offering business services with the help of computers. Whether it's keeping links with tradition or with futuristic technology, getting connected seems to be the buzzword of the decade. That's why there are programs that help SMEs brave the new world of technology by getting connected on the internet. Tracking technology as technology tracks us. It just never stops. Unfortunately, we have to. We've come to the end of another episode of Singapore at Work.
MTV News.
And the winner is Alanis Morissette.
Something that really strikes me about you is that you've reached this phenomenal success, yet you are extremely down to earth and extremely mature and almost unfazed by it.
I am unfazed by it, I guess. I don't know why. I guess I don't give in to the illusion that is what it is to be a celebrity, what it is to be known in the public eye. It's very simple to me. It's my having written a record, you know, and people listening to it and enjoying it.
been labeled the angry white female by Rolling Stone magazine. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a little old. I think it's one-dimensional, and I think it sells not only me short, but it sells women short.
MTV News.